All right. Good morning. Здравствуйте. Спасибо за приглашение. Distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, I feel very honored to be at this conference, first time in Riga. I'm director of the Center for Holocaust Studies at the Jagiellonian University, and I teach at the UNESCO Chair for Education about the Holocaust. And after two very important presentations of history project and absolutely outstanding Mr. Rappel's call how to perceive the Holocaust now and in the future, I'm very honored to share with you my reflections after 10 years of experience in organizing and running the Summer Institute for Polish teachers, including last year we had Ukrainian teachers, one teacher from Moscow and one from Azerbaijan. I cooperate with the Illinois Holocaust Museum, the third in the world museum, and the Yad Vashem. So it's 10 years of cooperation with Professor Michael Berenbaum as well. 10 years already. He will be here tomorrow. And I also ran the master program teaching about the Holocaust and totalitarianisms in Krakow in Poland. So my view will be to really present representations of the Holocaust, memory of the Holocaust, education about the Holocaust, and I hope to be analytical, not only descriptive, because it's very interesting why we have in Poland and elsewhere islands of memory and islands of non-memory. They are still taboo topics of collaboration, for example, and it's entangled with this double victimization rhetoric. And also we have many German studies which indicate that visits at memorial sites and museums do not affect attitudes as much as it was expected. And actually education about the Holocaust does not diminish the anti-Semitism, which is a very sad outcome and very troubling one. So I think it's high time to pass this rhetoric of education, which is like mantra of so many politicians, and look at the factors determining success and failure of education about the Holocaust as well. To continue, of course, to continue when the Holocaust survivors will be gone, because there are model strategies to continue it, as we know very well. So this will be a case study from Poland with some implications for other countries, I think particularly Baltic countries. And professor of literature in Poland, one of the very few left authorities after Władysław Bartoszewski, who has died recently, she wrote the very important words that we will never be purified. The Holocaust will remain a mourning without end, because she said, where is the end of the mourning of between 1 million, 1.5 million of Jewish children, when we can say that it's enough of mourning? She says it's a never-ending process. We cannot stop this mourning. And then she says the chance is not lost, and it's important to talk particularly to young people. I would like to recall a professor of history from Harvard, Charles Mayer, who said, and many others as well, that we remember as a communities particularly well when the victimhood is the core of our collective memory building process. And he claims that communities of memory cannot empathize with the victims from other communities of memory. We could say that common sense confirms this statement. Nonetheless, many educational projects contradict it, because when we interview leaders of the NGOs, non-governmental institutions, or academic professors dealing with the Holocaust education, we ask them what's their motives and motivation, they say empathy. So this contradicts their statements. And there are students of our institute at the wall of the former ghetto in Warsaw. And you can see they initiate this field studies. They initiate. It's not professors who tell them to go. So there is really this chance, Maria Janion said, that to talk to young people, because this is them, future historians, social scientists, were activists of NGOs and people working at the museum who will carry the education about the Holocaust and memory of the Holocaust into the future. I absolutely do agree with Mr. Rappel that linguistically this term Holocaust belongs only to Jews. It cannot be overused, instrumentalized as it is now, but as a historical fact, Holocaust is also part of the history of Europe. So at the Jagiellonian University, the oldest university in Poland, it is taught within the European studies. And why? Because it happened to Jews, but it was a clash of European civilization. And who did it? Initiated as a German project by educated Germans. Lawyers with PhD, doctors with PhD, conducting numerous medical experiments with a lot of problems with justice after the Holocaust. And because it happened in Polish land, it also belongs to history of Poland and history of the World War II. Because if we teach about the Holocaust like something which happened to them, Jews, then we do not take responsibility because it happened not to us. So I think it's the major thing is to integrate the education about the Holocaust into our historical narratives. And Polish landscape is full of abandoned, some well-preserved, some not preserved Jewish cemeteries. There's 1,200 Jewish cemeteries in Poland, 400 were destroyed. This is Bobowa, a very famous Hasidic place in Poland, still with many Jewish pilgrims visiting Bobowa. But there is also Starachowice. Professor Christopher Browning wrote a book about Starachowice camps, where actually this is almost a symbol of coexistence. We have to say that and underline that there was a life before the Holocaust which was gone and destroyed, but there was a life and almost 1,000 years of Polish-Jewish coexistence in Poland. And between 4 and 4.5 million Jews were killed in occupied Poland, so 80%. That's why we cannot stop to teach about the Holocaust, because Polish landscape is surrounded by mass graves, by killing sites, so many unknown in the backyard of some grandpa's houses and farms. There were about almost 2 million of Polish victims, which makes teaching about the Holocaust and integrating the Holocaust very hard, because we do have in Poland and in many post-Soviet countries, and also not in Western Europe, but in Central Eastern Europe, sort of competing victimhood issue, where there is a certain reluctance to teach about the Holocaust due to lack of acknowledgement of own suffering of ethnic Poles, which caused the problem. So the correct way to teach is that yes, there were Polish victims, and of course, as researchers, we have to address the issue of bystanders and witnesses, because this term is actually deconstructed right now, because victims and bystanders were bystanders and witnesses were also the victims, like all Poles, but also were killers as well. So this Hilberg's category is not sufficient anymore. That's how the Warsaw looked after the war. So 80% were killed on occupied Polish territory, 80% of all murdered Jews, and 90% of Polish Jews. All 6 former German Nazi death camps are in today's Poland. They're their monuments and museums and educational centers, but Bełżec is one of the, I would say, the outstanding representation of the Holocaust. When there is a road into the mass grave, you really enter this space. It makes enormous impact. But it's not so well attended because it's in a remote part of eastern Poland, and as the Sobibór is. And of course Auschwitz, as rightly was presented, it's a symbol of the Holocaust, and sort of when we talk about years after the war of commemoration of the Holocaust, that Auschwitz really caught attention because of the number of survivors, right? The Bełżec, Treblinka, Sobibór, there was no one to tell this history of those camps. And Auschwitz, it's the biggest Jewish cemetery and the biggest Polish cemetery. So when I was mentioning this competition of suffering, this relates to that. So whose history should be taught at this memorial site? Mainly the history of the memorial site. This is a mistake of almost 1.5 million of visitors annually go to Auschwitz. But do they learn about the Holocaust in Auschwitz? No, and they're not supposed to learn about the Holocaust there, because they can only learn about the history of this particular concentration and former death camp. So this is a mistake we should be really aware as researchers. Very important new historiography emerging in Poland is that Poles didn't have influence on first two phases of the Holocaust, but they had influence on the third phase of the Holocaust. And this is still a taboo topic in common consciousness and in many other countries as well. East of Auschwitz, I would say, using your terminology, very correct terminology. Aleida Assmann in December in Austrian Academy of Science asked the question whether the Holocaust is a German project. What she meant is not that it wasn't initiated by Germany, it was, but whether European countries really think about their own involvement in a Holocaust. Because she thinks that the memory of the Holocaust and history of the Holocaust can be a common memory for Europe. The only one, actually, which can really unite divided memories and competing memories in Europe. When we speak about Polish remembrance, it was very distorted after the war, and due to communist ideology, but not only, the family memories. People had own dead to commemorate, to cry and to mourn. There was like no time, no space to mourn Polish Jews and European Jews as well. But then the personal memories of families, they were very vivid after the war, but then they were denied, suppressed. People were ashamed to confront the own shameful behavior of own families and the very shameful murdering of Jews, those who escaped from the trains going to the camps by their neighbors, by those who really wanted to take advantage, or just out of anti-Semitism, out of pure hate. And the trends of education in Poland were actually, the focus was and still is on national martyrology. And the causes of amnesia are, of course, censorship, lack of Jews, carriers of memory, although we have very, very vivid Jewish communities in Poland, very visible, not numerous, but very visible. And with the opening of the Museum History of Polish Jews and its core exhibition, the museum is really attended, and the educational programs are designed and booked actually till the end of the year. So it's very successful in terms of incorporating Jewish history and also teaching about who were Jews and what happened to them. This is not the Museum of the Holocaust, but it has very, very strong, powerful exhibition on the Holocaust, focused on the Warsaw Ghetto, done by Professors Barbara Enkel-King and Jacek Leociak, psychologist and professor of literature. So this is your call that the Holocaust, the education about the Holocaust should be interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. This is actually going on. It's very, very important. We do have, after 1980, in Poland, the attempt of memory reanimations with a very important public debates, and Poland is, I would say, stands up because of the important essay Poor Poles Are Looking at the Ghetto by Jan Błoński, professor of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, and then three major debates. The biggest debate was on Jedwabne case in 2000 by Jan Tomasz Gross. What's important is that when Polish historians, young historians, write on a basis of archives about individual collaboration, I want to emphasize that the Holocaust was a German project, but individual collaboration happened in Poland. There is a silence. The reviews by peers are very positive. There is no big debates. When Jan Tomasz Gross writes a book, then debates are enormous with thousands of articles in journals. Polish students do not know much about the Holocaust. The correct answer of the victims was only 14%. I conduct the empirical studies on attitudes toward Jews, meaning contemporary anti-Semitism, attitudes toward the Holocaust, attitudes toward memory of the Holocaust for 20 years almost, since 1996. But when we compare experimental groups, those students who go to memorial sites, to museums, or invite the Holocaust survivors, and we ask the question whether the memory of the Holocaust is personally important to them, we see big differences, statistically significant differences. So education makes impact, but it's very important to look at the determinants of successful education compared to control groups. When we design education about the Holocaust, we need more empirical studies. Just a few examples. I'm aware of time and that we already should have coffee. This Polish teacher of history in Krakow, he takes his students, Polish students, every year for the march of commemorating the deportation of Krakow's Jews to Płaszów from the ghetto, from the former ghetto. Why this Polish flag? Because he wants to. This is a symbolic way to say what happened. The fate of Krakow's Jews. It's our history because they were citizens of Poland. It should be our history. And Polish students from Warsaw at the Jewish cemetery in Tykocin, that's where they learn about the Holocaust as well, to see absence. When seeing absence, emptiness. Another example from Lublin, Citygate Theatre and End, they made the model of the former Jewish quarter. And that's how they teach about Lublin's Jews, because this history was a non-history, non-memory after so many years in Poland after 1945. And how to teach, so it would involve affective component of attitudes also, to show one Jewish boy, Henio Żytomierski, the boy from assimilated Jewish family in Lublin. This organization puts the photograph of this Jewish boy at the age 7, taken in July 39. The school starts September 39. The school didn't start because of September 1st, 39. They put this enlarged photo in the front of the bank where the photo was taken before the war. The bank still exists. And students, pupils, just inhabitants of Lublin can write personal letters to Henio Żytomierski. That's how to remember one fate, one Jewish boy, to really, this is a very, very powerful educational project. Many Polish teachers, educators start with cleaning abandoned cemetery. And there was example from Bodzentyn. Another example, just few cases of very positive education. Matsevat for everyday use. Very young artist, photographer. He traveled around Poland and just taking picture of the Matsevot used first by German as a material to build roads, and then Poles continue after the war this practice. So this is a sandbox in Szczecin, and people did it out of ignorance, and also out of not including the fate of Polish Jews into memory of the World War II, dividing it, sort of rejecting even it. And I mentioned those factors which contributed to this view, why it was not our history and not our memory. Polish teachers, we have 600 graduates already from the summer institutes. It's very interesting because we evaluate very, very carefully by external evaluators also the outcomes of this institute and the reasons. When we ask teachers why they want to spend 1 week, July 1st, 7, every year in Krakow to learn about the Holocaust from early morning to late evening, they say the truth. We want to know what really have happened. That's what brings them to Krakow. We accept children from all over Poland, from very small places, far away from academic centers. This is what really interests them, not distorted history or historical narrative, but really how was it. So I would like to conclude with a quote from external evaluator from the Stanford University, Dr. Magdalena Gross. Teaching about Polish Jewish history, mutual relations. Finally, the Holocaust must include both real-time activities with Jewish people, Jewish culture and Jewishness, as well as discovering local history, its people, its places. If it's uncomfortable, dark history, it should be incorporated as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful presentation. It made me think. I have one question. You talked about there was no Polish influence on the first and second phase of the Holocaust, but on the third. What do you consider to be the first, second, and third phase? Can you shortly answer that?
Yes. Of course, the phases of the Holocaust, as described in historical research, mainly creating of the ghettos, and then, of course, implementation of the Nuremberg laws. That's the very first phase of the Holocaust. And then the third phase, as described in books by Jan Grabowski, for example, and Barbara Engelking, Andrzej Żbikowski, and many other Polish historians, and Jan Tomasz Gross, of course, as well. The deportations, that's the third phase, when Jews escaped. And I gave these numbers that actually there was like 200 Jews tried, according to these statistics, but we'll never find out exact numbers. Unfortunately, Jews try to escape by jumping from the trains, by trying to hide, or even trying actively protect their life by hiding in a forest, and they were denounced. So this is the very third phase. So some Poles were helping, but many were denouncing, and many were afraid to help. And also, I wrote, together with Robert Schuchta, my colleague educator, an article in Intercultural Education last year. It's published already, whether the history of the Holocaust is reflected in the newest Polish textbooks after 2008. So, as a history, major facts are reflected according to international standards of teaching about the Holocaust and historical narrative. But the context of the righteous, this context is underrepresented in a textbook. So, the view is on the righteous and the context is that they were afraid of their Polish neighbors. So this is still a taboo topic in the textbooks. And yet Jedwabne, it is presented in every textbook. But Andrzej Żbikowski found more than 60 localities near the Łomża districts where similar pogroms occurred. And if Jedwabne is represented as a unique case, it creates distorted history and distorted collective memory of the next generation of Poles also. Okay. Thank you.